Breaking news today. Should Ukraine join NATO? What outcomes can we expect? After Russia's invasion last year, Ukraine redoubled its efforts to join NATO, claiming that the security guarantees it received from Moscow, Washington, and London in 1994, when it gave up its nuclear arsenal to Russia, were obviously worthless. NATO is holding a summit in Vilnius on Tuesday and Wednesday. Eastern European countries have said that a roadmap should be offered to Kyiv at the summit, but the United States and Germany are wary of doing anything that could bring the alliance closer to war with Russia. To justify his decision to deploy tens of thousands of troops into neighboring Ukraine on February 24, 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin has pointed to NATO's expansion towards Russia's borders over the past 2 decades. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg has already ruled out an official invitation for Kyiv at the upcoming summit, as any expansion of NATO requires the agreement of all 31 members. Ukraine's progress toward NATO membership, a potential compromise regarding future steps, and Russia's take on the situation are outlined below. A route without a map. At a summit in Bucharest in 2008, NATO members decided that Ukraine, which had been part of the Soviet Union under Moscow's rule until the collapse of that empire in 1991, could join the alliance in the future. But NATO leaders did not provide Kyiv with a so-called Membership Action Plan, MAP, that would chart a course toward closer affiliation with the bloc. After that, in 2014, Moscow illegally annexed Crimea from Ukraine and supported separatist proxies in eastern Ukraine. Though Stoltenberg declared that NATO membership was Ukraine's rightful place, during an April visit to Kyiv, he later made it clear that the country could not join as long as its war with Russia continued. Russian forces currently control much of Ukraine's east and south. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said at the beginning of June that his country understood this position, but by the end of the month he had renewed his calls for a political invitation to NATO to be extended to Ukraine at the summit. Candidates must demonstrate they meet political, economic, and military criteria, and are able to contribute militarily to NATO operations, under the MAP process followed by other ex-communist countries in Eastern Europe. Finland and Sweden, both of which were neutral until recently but worked closely with NATO, were invited to join the alliance directly. Since 1999, most countries seeking to join NATO have participated in a MAP, although this procedure is not mandatory. As more and more countries, including Britain and Germany, suggest skipping the MAP process, it is unclear what Ukraine's path to membership will look like. Without extending an invitation to Ukraine or setting a specific timeline, this would satisfy the demands of Kyiv and its Eastern European allies for NATO to move beyond the language of the Bucharest Summit Agreement of 2008. Since Russia's full-scale invasion, the Ukrainian armed forces have made significant progress toward NATO standards. Ukrainian troops are being trained to NATO standards and supplied with increasingly sophisticated weaponry while their supply of Soviet-made arms and ammunition steadily dwindles. Why is it so controversial for Ukraine to join? The alliance's founding members signed a mutual assistance clause in 1949 to protect themselves from a potential Soviet attack. It is often cited as one of the primary arguments against Ukraine joining NATO during the ongoing conflict with Russia. Article 5 of the Washington Treaty establishes that an attack on any one NATO member is considered an attack on the entire alliance. Stoltenberg has made it clear that only full members of the alliance will receive security guarantees under Article 5, despite the fact that NATO must discuss options for providing security assurances to Ukraine in the aftermath of the war. While Russia's government claims the expansion shows Western hostility, its Western counterparts insist the alliance is purely defensive. Moscow has warned Ukraine that joining NATO will result in years of trouble and an unspecified response to guarantee Ukraine's safety. In the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin engages in some creepy child-pleasing behavior with a young girl of 8 years old. After seeing Razat Akapova in tears during his recent trip to Dagestan, the 70-year-old Russian president greeted her with a hug and flowers. Putin gives 8-year-old Razat Akapova a tour of his Kremlin office and demonstrates his phone system. After Putin saw Razat crying during his visit to Dagestan last month, he greeted her with a hug and flowers, as seen in this EPA Putin, AFP composite. In a video released by the government, Razat can be seen calling the finance minister using Putin's phone system. The minister, understandably bewildered, quickly agrees to allocate an additional £43 million to Razat's home region. The move coincides with Putin's efforts to reclaim leadership following a failed coup. Fears that Putin has planted bombs on a power plant's reactors have put the world on high alert for a potential nuclear catastrophe that could affect billions of people. Authorities in Ukraine fear that the dictator plans to detonate a nuclear bomb at the Zaporizhzhia power plant, which could cause a catastrophe 10 times worse than Chernobyl. Concerns about an explosion are so great that the Ukrainian government is staging terrifying nuclear disaster drills in and around the enormous complex. On Tuesday, explosive devices were reportedly planted on the roofs of the plant's third and fourth reactors, according to military leaders in the war-torn country. Russian troops have occupied the area since the start of the conflict, but intelligence suggests they have been ordered to evacuate because an attack is imminent. A large explosion at the plant, according to nuclear experts, would affect 1 billion people in 40 countries.